In their journals, the Spanish wrote of the Pericu tribe of Baja with a mix of fascination and condescension. The tribe's unique language, quick and melodic, caught their attention. They dubbed the people Pericus, meaning parakeets, because their speech resembled the chatter of the colorful birds. The Spanish were also perplexed by the tribe's physical distinctiveness, noting their height and the shape of their skulls. These features, coupled with the Pericu's expertise in maritime navigation, suggested to the Spaniards that they were not like other indigenous peoples they had encountered in the region. Meanwhile, hidden in the deep folds of the Amazon and the windswept tip of Baja California, two ancient peoples, separated by continents, oceans, and millennia, may share a story far older and stranger than we think. The Piraha of Brazil, with their hauntingly musical language that sounds like the calls of rainforest songbirds, and the Pericu of Baja California, once described by Spanish missionaries as speaking in a style that was sung or whistled, represent two linguistic mysteries that refuse to fit neatly into the boxes of modern linguistics. Could these two cultures, so geographically distant, actually be long-lost cousins, survivors of an ancient migration from a forgotten wave of humanity that carved its way through the Americas long before recorded history? To unravel this possibility, we must begin with the Piraha. Living along the Mici River in the Brazilian Amazon, the Piraha are one of the most enigmatic and linguistically unique tribes in the world. Their language, which shares its name, is radically different from anything else known today. It lacks subordinate clauses, has no fixed words for colors, and no numerals. Most famously, it can be spoken, sung, hummed, or even whistled, depending on the context. This gives Piraha a musicality that is unlike any other living language on Earth. To an outsider, the Piraha might sound more like a flock of birds calling to one another through the dense forest than people speaking. This impression is not accidental. Linguist Daniel Everett, who spent decades living with the Piraha, was astonished to discover that their entire communication system was so embedded in musical rhythm and pitch that the language could survive in song even when words were dropped. Piraha tones carry meaning through pitch and stress, not through isolated phonemes like English or Spanish. This tonal quality means that the language can be sung across rivers or through the canopy in ways that spoken words would not travel. In other words, Piraha isn't just a spoken language. It's an auditory ecology, perfectly adapted to the acoustic conditions of the rainforest. Now imagine something very similar, but in the deserts of Baja California. When the Spanish missionaries encountered the Pericu in the 18th century at the very southern tip of the Baja Peninsula, they were perplexed not only by the Pericu's appearance, which they described as distinct from nearby groups, but by their language. It didn't sound like any other indigenous tongue they had heard in the region. Reports described it as melodic, almost sung, and in some cases communicated through whistling tones rather than clear consonants and vowels. Unfortunately, the language of the Pericu is now extinct, and what survives are tantalizing scraps. Lists of words jotted down by priests, short phrases, and ethno-historical accounts. But those scraps hint at something extraordinary. Like the Piraha, the Pericu may have employed a language that emphasized tone, rhythm, and musicality rather than strict lexical rules. Some Spanish sources suggested the Pericu could communicate over long distances with whistles, an ability that closely mirrors the Piraha's use of song and tone to speak across great spans of rainforest. This method of communication, so rare in human societies, is typically found in groups who live in highly challenging environments where conventional speech fails. Dense forests, steep canyons, windy coasts, environments where birds and nature speak in whistles, not in words. This coincidence may be more than poetic. What if these tonal musical languages are not isolated inventions, but distant echoes of a shared past? Archaeology and genetics are beginning to open doors to such possibilities. Recent studies have uncovered evidence of a mysterious Australasian genetic signal in the genomes of ancient populations in Brazil and Panama, including in the remains of Lagoa Santa and other early Holocene sites. This signal, while still hotly debated, suggests that long before the ancestors of modern Native Americans spread from Siberia through Beringia, another wave, or waves of humans may have made their way to the Americas via a Pacific route. The people carrying these genes may have hugged the coasts, moving southward along the Pacific Rim from Southeast Asia and Melanesia, using primitive rafts or canoes. Some may have entered South America via Panama, following the coast until they reached Brazil. Others may have traveled northward, settling in outposts along the way. If these early navigators were seafaring hunter-gatherers, their languages may have retained acoustic qualities well suited to environmental conditions, open coasts, roaring surf, and echoing canyons, where melody and tone made messages easier to hear than plosive consonants. Could these proto-languages have given rise to the tonal musical speech found in the Piraha, and perhaps even in the Pericu? It's not impossible. While mainstream anthropology has been slow to accept large-scale Pacific coastal migrations, new genetic data has made the idea more plausible. The ancient DNA of Luzia woman, a 12,000-year-old skeleton found in Brazil, shows cranial features that are more similar to Australians and Melanesians than to Northeast Asians. Genetic remnants of this wave have also been found in the DNA of some Amazonian groups, particularly among the Surui and the Caritiana, who carry genetic traces not found in most Native Americans. The Piraha themselves have not been fully sequenced in a genetic study, largely due to their resistance to outside interference, but neighboring groups in the Amazon do carry this signal. Meanwhile, the Pericu, isolated at the end of the Baja Peninsula, existed for thousands of years with almost no contact with the mainland. Their skeletal morphology was also unusual, described as tall and robust, with crania that some researchers have said resemble Paleo-American features more than those of later native Californian tribes. In the mid-20th century, archaeologists noted the persistence of archaic technologies among the Pericu, including a reliance on marine foraging, stone tools, and evidence of seafaring, suggesting they were cultural holdouts from an earlier way of life, one that might have more in common with early coastal migrants than with the later farming cultures of Mesoamerica. The language of the Pericu was unlike any other on the peninsula. Neighboring tribes referred to them as Edus, meaning people with a different language. Though some early Spanish observers speculated a connection to the Guaycura language, this theory proved tenuous at best. Today, only a handful of words and place names survive, tantalizing fragments of a tongue that has long since vanished. This makes the musicality of their language all the more intriguing. If both the Pericu and the Piraha represent remnants of this ancient coastal migration, one that skirted the continents along their Pacific and Atlantic edges, then their linguistic similarities may not be coincidental. They may be vestiges of a proto-language, an ancestral tongue that prized tone and rhythm over syntax and complex structure. In a world before cities and writing, where speech needed to echo across waves or forest canopy, perhaps language was closer to song than to speech. There's something deeply human in this idea. Our earliest languages may have been more like music than prose. Many primates use tonal calls, and songbirds, famous for their learned, structured melodies, often communicate in ways that mirror the tonal and rhythmic patterns seen in the Piraha. It's not hard to imagine our distant ancestors doing the same, using tone and melody to communicate in the dawn mists of the Pleistocene. In fact, Daniel Everett has suggested that the Piraha language may be a linguistic fossil, one that preserves elements of pre-modern human speech. It may be the closest thing we have to an Ice Age tongue. The Pericu were hunter-gatherers, relying heavily on both the land and the sea for sustenance. By day, the men hunted deer, rabbits, and small game in the desert using bows, arrows, and atlatls. Others took to the waters on wooden rafts propelled by double-bladed paddles, diving expertly for fish and shellfish. Women and children collected cactus fruits, agave and pitahaya, their nimble fingers harvesting the desert's sparse offerings. This seamless blend of maritime and terrestrial resourcefulness defined their lives. Their dwellings were temporary, reflecting their nomadic lifestyle. In the cooler months, they sought shelter in caves or rock shelters. When the weather was warm, they slept beneath the stars, their communal campfires warding off the chill of the desert nights. Life was simple, dictated by the rhythm of the seasons and the abundance, or scarcity, of nature's gifts. The Pericu stood out, even among the diverse tribes of the Americas. Taller than their neighbors, they possessed long, narrow skulls, an anatomical feature that baffled early anthropologists. These physical traits suggested an origin distinct from the Siberian ancestors of most Native Americans. Indeed, genetic research has linked the Pericu to populations in southern Asia, Australia, and the Pacific Rim, hinting at an ancient migratory journey across the sea. Their customs reflected this uniqueness. They often went naked, save for adornments like necklaces of shells, berries, or black pearls burned to a lustrous sheen. Their bodies bore intricate paintings, geometric patterns drawn with pigments from the earth. The women wore modest skirts woven from grass or animal hides and adorned themselves with body paint and jewelry. Both men and women smoked tobacco, their pipes carved from wood or stone, the smoke spiraling into the desert sky. The Pericu, tragically, were driven to extinction before their language could be studied in detail. What we know comes from fragmented missionary reports, archaeological digs and skull measurements. But in those fragments lies a tantalizing parallel with the Piraha, a language sung across the sea wind, a people who resisted cultural assimilation for centuries, and evidence of a deep and ancient ancestry that ties them not only to the Americas, but possibly to a forgotten global movement of early humans who hugged the world's coasts, following the edge of the sea. This linguistic mystery adds to the Pericu's aura of isolation and antiquity. Some researchers believe their language, like their skulls, may have ties to populations in the Pacific Rim, further supporting the theory of an ancient transoceanic migration. The Pericus share cranial morphology with ancient fossil remains from Argentina and Brazil. So what would it mean if these two groups really were distant kin? It would upend our assumptions about how languages evolve and disperse. It would suggest that certain acoustic features, whistling, singing, tonal phrasing, aren't random or decorative, but adaptive features selected by environment and preserved across tens of thousands of years. It would also support the idea that the Americas were peopled not in a single wave, but by multiple groups, from multiple origins, including a long-lost population from the Pacific world, whose echoes still reverberate in the language of a few uncontacted tribes and in the broken songs of peoples long extinct. Today, only the Piraha remain to carry this legacy. Their resistance to assimilation, conversion, and modernization has frustrated missionaries, linguists, and anthropologists for decades, but in that resistance lies their genius. They have preserved something unique, not only in language, but in worldview. Their culture has no mythology, no writing, and no interest in abstract speculation about things they haven't seen. They live in the present, speak with rhythm and song, and keep their stories grounded in the tangible world of the rainforest. In this way, they are perhaps the last living witnesses to a linguistic world that predates writing, cities, and colonization, a world where song was speech, and speech was survival. And perhaps, somewhere in the deserts of Baja, under the layers of wind-blown sand, there are still traces of another voice, another song, waiting to be heard again. We may never hear the Pericu sing again, but in the songs of the Piraha, we might just catch a note, a ghostly echo of that ancient harmony. In their journals, the Spanish wrote of the Pericu